Good afternoon. So we've got a double header here. Played these games a couple weeks ago. Finally getting around to doing a voiceover. Um, I'm trying a bunch of things around with the editing, still learning the software. Any feedback is good feedback. Let me know if it's jerky. Let me know if you like it this way or if you'd prefer me to simply narrate my games, though I do get myself into trouble talking too much. Um, and I was talking whilst playing these games, but it does lead to some pretty slow mouse movements and leads to me timing out during sideboarding here as well. So first hand, not keepable. Single Lotus Field doesn't do anything. We're going to ship it. Second hand's pretty good. We're up against a Yorion and feeling pretty good about ourselves generally. Trying to set up a turn 2 stock up. Tapped Hollow Fountain means we're pretty free to not play the stock up, actually. Blue-white can struggle when it's playing behind on board. It's not able to interact with multiple things in the same turn as easily. So instead, we're going to force them to make choices very early on in the game. Playing our stock up, trying to hit our land drops. We have the Nissa, which later on can find the bears. We have an Icetill Explorer, which is going to be our premier threat here. And our biggest goal in this matchup is to establish a Port of Karfell with black mana and try to remove the necessity of needing to cast our spells. This deck is very good at playing through counter magic and playing through disruption because casting spells is fairly optional once you're able to get to the right board state. So focusing on hitting our land drops, establishing Ports of Karfell, establishing black mana to be able to recur our threats, and trying to push the game to a point where blue-white can no longer do anything about what we're presenting. So here we want to resolve this Icetill Explorer. It's better on this board than the Nissa. We're looking for an Iganjo on the Nissa to remove it. We don't get it, but we do get to play this Icestill Explorer and cross our fingers about it resolving. Most of the time, I am looking to slow the game down and not play into what blue-white has, because the scary cards are all 4 mana. But here, because we're forcing the opponent to play a turn behind on board, we can play into their counter magic and not enable them to simply spend a turn catching back up, killing the Nissa. So we get a 3 steps ahead, which is the best possible counterspell. It's going to allow us access to the Icestill Explorer still. And now we're going to try to stock up, try to keep hitting relevant land drops, keep recurring our threats, keep trying to keep our game moving forward. Zovin's Veto kind of stops that here, and drawing back-to-back Lotus Fields is pretty bad for us. But we'll be all right here. It's not too concerning. Now, what our opponent needs to hit is a removal spell for this Nissa. The primary concern I have is for them to untap and play a Wandering Emperor. That would be pretty bad for us here. We are a couple lands away from activating this Port of Karfell, but of course drawing the second port into the Field of Ruin is pretty good. We have more ports than they have Field of Ruins usually. Field of Ruin is a pretty key card in this matchup because Port is our best card in this matchup. Again, playing the Nissa, seeing if there's a Wandering Emperor. There presumably wasn't last turn, but turns out there was a Wandering Emperor. Opponent has recognized they're the beatdown, and they are pushing to get this game over as quickly as possible. I am looking to see if they choose to tick down the Wandering Emperor to exile the Nissa, or to exile what we reanimate off of the Port of Karfell this turn. And if that happens, our Arboreal Grazer might be able to block 4 damage, so we're waiting to see if they choose to produce additional Samurais first. But we've got 4 Analysts and 4 Bears in our deck. We are pretty good at hitting one of them here, but if we miss, thanks to the 3 steps ahead, the Icestill Explorer is a live hit. Hitting the Icestill Explorer will allow us to get a Nissa flip, and it will allow us to continuously present Ports of Carfell or continuously surveil with this hedge maze in our graveyard. The opponent choosing to keep the Nissa around is what is going to punish them here. The Nissa is operating in this list as a 9th untap effect. We are looking to establish first Ports of Carfell so that we are able to continuously present threats. Secondly, the Ports of Carfell will also allow us to continuously mill our deck. And eventually, with no untapper in play, we will quite quickly achieve a game state in which we can activate multiple Ports of Carfell in the same turn, and then at instant speed be able to flip a Thassa's Oracle into play and win the game. The opponent electing to, again, not cash in the Wandering Emperor, but instead use a March of Otherworldly Light that could have gone at the Nissa, and continuing to not respect the impact that Nissa is going to have on this game. Looking at what the opponent has going on here, of course the hand is hidden, but them trying to push damage into blockers and try to pressure an opponent at 14 life, they don't have an ability to end the game immediately. The Simic Scapeshift deck is able to very easily not only generate a game state in which casting spells is optional, but it also presents a lot of interesting situations and unusual scenarios. So here, we could activate a Port of Carfell, but we don't have a guaranteed hit. We've got the Aftermath Analyst because they allowed us to flip it off of our Nissa. So we can pay for a Normalize, we can force them to use 2 spells on it if that's what they want to do, or we can just play it, we can hang it over their head, we've got several lands to get back, and just continue to slowly push the game forward. The way that you should be feeling when the game is in this state is that you're in a commanding lead. There is very little in game 1 that blue-white can do that's going to get them out of this position. The most frightening card is Farewell, which is an uncommon card game 1, but it does happen in game 1. So we are acknowledging that there are some unlikely scenarios that we cannot beat, but most of the time, we're not going to have to worry about those. So passing the turn, planning on doing a block sack, which will put us to activating 2 Ports Carfell in a turn. It will flip our Nissa. It will save us all of the damage on this turn cycle. The opponent can't attack with a 2/2 into the Nissa, and so they're incentivized to make it a 3/3, which will take away their ability to continue to use the Wandering Emperor to remove our threats, but we're pretty much done attacking at this point. It's not terribly difficult for us to set up a board state in which we're looking at instant speed flipping a Thassa's Oracle into play. The way that the matchup plays out is very similar to this regardless of threat assessment. You might be looking at this game and going, but Jason, what do I do if I'm not a Luxac? What do I do if my opponent is appropriately evaluating my threats? What do I do if my opponent's deck is in the best order it can be? And the answer to that is, first, don't get caught by the auto tapper like I did here, and make sure you leave your Port of Carfell on tap so that you can activate it and put the Aftermath Analyst back into play. But also to push the game state to a point where casting spells is optional. Okay? Being able to repeatedly present the same threat against a control deck like this, and as your deck runs out of cards, Thassa's Oracle becomes increasingly threatening. So the opponent is running out of things to do. They play out their Teferi, hoping that they're able to stave us off for a turn here, but the game's pretty much done. We have tons of mana. We're able to activate multiple ports on this turn if we choose to. We have a bunch of lands in the graveyard. We're able to play out a Lotus Field to establish a loop if we hit one of our 2 Arid Archways. About halfway through our deck, we're pretty likely to have hit one by now. This bear hits one finally. And now we have everything we need in order to use the Arid Archway or the Takenuma to return a Lumra back to our hand, replay the Lumra, get all the lands back, make the mana with Nissa to do it all over again, and just repeatedly cycle a bear with the Otawara. We're going to start trying to do that pretty soon here, and the opponent is going to choose to interact. But let me know what you guys are struggling with. I'm really interested in learning not only where this deck succeeds well, but also what the challenges are. And the challenges that I've been having with this deck are not the same as the challenges that most people seem to be having with it. And this matchup, I think, is a really good example. You don't need Mistrized Villages in your sideboard. You're trying to set up a board where casting spells is optional. So here, Arid Archway picks up our Takenuma for value. We're to make enough mana to Otawara back the bear and replay the bear off of the Nissa here. Otawara is only 2 mana with 2 legends in play, so being able to put all of our Lotus Fields into the garbage so that we can then get them back and continue to cycle the Archway and enough lands for us to be able to present an infinite and eventually pick up the Thassa's Oracle with the Takenuma, which we're also able to hold up a Port of Carfil permanently throughout this loop. But we'll see the interaction point from the opponent is March of Otherworldly Light, pitching their hand on the Lumra. Of course, not going to be good enough. Channeling the Otawara into the graveyard. It's going to come right back with an Arid Archway as we port in response. And we even mill a second Archway here. So opponent picks it up. Moving into sideboarding here. We are very happy about having Tishana's Tiebinders. We're happy with Heritage Reclamations here. We're happy with the Tireless Tracker here. Almost any cards you can sideboard are good. Most of the cards that are going to be in your sideboard are going to be things that interact with permanents or things that are going to help you get through your deck. Tidebinder on a Planeswalker or a Field of Ruin is extremely powerful. Tireless Tracker, I like one. I think it's quite good. I don't think that you get to play 4. I don't think Pioneer is a format that really rewards overloading on card advantage effects very often, but planning to trim a couple Aftermath Analysts, trim a couple Scapeshifts, because we're not planning on our spells resolving here. We're planning on slowly pushing the game and being very judicious about when we're choosing to mill cards so that we don't get got by a Rest in Peace. But here's where talking really gets me. So whilst playing this, discussing all the sideboard options, discussing the sideboard plan, discussing how being judicious with when we're trying to mill, trying to play around our own cards and our own effects so that we don't accidentally get all of our win conditions exiled by a single Rest in Peace. Actually time out during the sideboard here. And I don't realize it until we get into mulligans in game 2. But trimming around the edges, cutting a Wandering Minstrel, cutting 2 Scapeshifts, cutting a couple Aftermath Analysts, not planning on our spells resolving, planning on taking as much time as we need, slowing the game down, playing at whatever pace our opponent is presenting in order to ensure that the game goes our way. And jumping into game 2 here. First hand, we want a little bit more action than that. Second hand's pretty good. pushing to be able to present things on turn 2 if our opponent is tapping out for card draw effects, trying to hit land drops, things like that. Um, Being able to turn 1 surveil is quite good. Arboreal Grazer, because we weren't able to save our sideboard here, just trying to make sure that we're able to hit enough threats in a row. Ice-Still Explorer, of course, being an excellent threat to hit. And just maximizing our surveils is our plan. So unlike last game where we were able to present a threat underneath counter magic, this game we don't get to do that because we're on the draw. So our plan is to accumulate as much value out of our lands in our opening hand as we can, so that we can spend as much time as possible getting to our bigger spells and our payoffs. Looking to play spells instead of on curve. Our biggest goal is to prevent the opponent from curving out. Narset here is pretty heartbreaking. Losing the card draw on Spelunking always chokes me a little bit. But we don't want our opponent to be able to curve out. Like, if they play all of their spells on time, then they're probably going to win because we have more lands in our deck. Instead, we need to make sure that the spells that we cast are going to have a more potent effect on the game state than them trading 2 mana for our 3 mana spell. So we play the Splunking, we get to play the Ice-Still Explorer, we get to Surveil again, and just continue to increase our mana and move our game further towards the game state that I'm going to keep repeating myself where spell casting is optional. Opponent here finding a Memory Deluge. That's the card that you really want to play into. Instead of allowing them to curve out and playing into their No More Lies, then into their 3 steps ahead, then into their double spell turn on turn 4. Instead, he's got a Memory Deluge. I don't want him to cast it. I don't want to allow the opponent to spend time accruing card advantage. Instead, I'd like to delay that card advantage and extend the game even further. I am very much the control deck and very much not interested in the game ending quickly. Because I have a Thassa's Oracle in my deck. If the game goes until I run out of cards, I'm going to win the game because that's what Thassa's Oracle does. The better that you enable the blue-white player to curve out, the quicker the game starts to go poorly for you. So here I think I miscount my mana on the port. Oh no, I just see if the game's over immediately. Sometimes it is. Sometimes your opponent doesn't have anything. In Scapeshift, we don't need to get anything more off of this Scapeshift. We have the port, we have the black mana for the port. Like the Scapeshift is not a necessary thing to be able to win this game. So just trading it for a spell, preventing them from casting Memory Deluge, and thankfully not embarrassing myself by playing the Spelunking before finishing off the Narset. This does enable them to Sorcery Speed a Wandering Emperor if they've got it, but I would rather draw a spell because I like drawing spells. We've got everything we need. We no longer, hopefully, fingers crossed, we will no longer need to take another draw step or to cast another spell to win this game. And just giving the opponent a sec to see what they're going to do here, and it is going to be a Sorcery Speed Wandering Emperor. Given that Ice-Still Explorer accrued so much value last turn, getting lucky and drawing the Scapeshift here is kind of whatever. The game had already gotten to a point where we no longer needed to hit any draw steps. Eventually, we're going to find something with a port. Eventually, we're going to be able to win this game regardless of that draw step. But quickly going into combo here, I think that I've got an Aftermath Analyst in my graveyard. Um, yeah, this is the pile for Aftermath Analyst. We surveilled or milled an Aftermath Analyst earlier on in the game, so we're gonna get all of our Lotus Fields so that we have a surplus of mana in order to be able to put it in play and activate it and still net mana as we go. Hitting a bear is pretty nice. Um, the 0 power bear is the best bear because it'll come back twice. Um, and then at this point, we are just spoiled for choice. So just like that, the game's over. This is a deck that very much can punish players by winning out of nowhere, where while at the same time being able to hang that threat over them, whether you have it or not, and just chill out, just catch a vibe, just enjoy the process, right? Um, Here I'm talking about the decay that happened and waiting, but we'll jump right into the next game here. So this was immediately after. I just cut out the middle bit. This hand's not super inspiring. You don't have to keep every hand with an untapper. Again, we're up against Yorion. Again, we just want spells. We want to be able to hit a third land drop. That's going to be meaningful here. And then this hand, we have more land drops that we can hit before we need to start choosing to sacrifice lands. We have a key card in the Portacarfel, and the Takenuma is a very late game option for us to consider. Sunken Citadel is 2 mana land. It's perfect. It accelerates us towards the Portacarfel. And we're going to continue to play slowly, to not allow our opponent to curve out, and to force them to make choices. The opponent is deciding to play a stock up, whether they're at risk of missing a land drop or not is impossible to say at this point, but really just take our time, relax, force the opponent to play behind on board if they tap out for a stock up or a Narset or something like that. Otherwise, forcing them to make difficult choices about the spells that they cast. So here we've got a ton of mana. We have mana to activate a Portacarfel if we play out a Lotus Field here, but we don't have a guaranteed hit. And the Portacarfel will be so much better later if we hang on to it for a minute. So we can just relax. I'm not super thrilled about sacrificing it here, but we're going to play an Icestill Explorer. If something happens to the Icestill Explorer, we have the Echoing Deeps to be able to get it back. It's not too risky, and we are forcing the opponent to choose between a Wandering Emperor, a Memory Deluge, or dealing with our stuff. Turns out the opponent has a Get Lost that they elected not to play on our Wandering Minstrel, and we get 2 land drops off of our Icestill Explorer as a result, revealing a Spelunking to our opponent. So now our opponent has lost this game. The route to victory that we're going with here, because this matchup is pretty good, and in game 1 there isn't a lot that they can really do about it, we have an option here to put ourselves on a very likely outcome of winning the game, but also potentially losing. If we play out this Lotus Field, sacrifice both the Lotus Fields, and then Scapeshift, we can try to win the game, but instead we can represent the Icestill Explorer and continue to mill cards and push towards having a guaranteed win, and not being too concerned about our deck being in the wrong order. We'll try to manufacture a little bit of agency here. If we hit a bear, perfect, we win the game on the spot. If we don't hit a bear, then we can put an Icestill Explorer into play, replay the Portacarfel, and try again the following turn. We've got unfortunately, drawing back-to-back Lotus Fields is not very good, but we've got another Lotus Field so that next turn we're able to put so many things into our graveyard this turn that next turn we can play a Lotus Field from our hand and then sacrifice Lotus Fields and go from there. So because we went on a very conservative route, we did not get the payoff of winning the game on the spot, but realistically, the opponent does not have good outs aside from Farewell, which they're a turn away from being able to do anyway. So opponent plays Ibiza and we'll see what they can present, and they tap out for an Narset because the game's either over or it isn't. Um, no, find another Wandering Emperor. But now we'll hop into combo mode and see how quickly we can get this game over with. Really trying to take on risk, and being able to control the amount of risk you're taking on is important. And in different matchups, you're going to want to take on more or less risk. But blue-white is not a mono-red. Like, we're not at risk of dying immediately. So we don't have to sacrifice a Lotus Field to our Lotus Fields in order to get the immediate payoff of winning the game on the spot. That is not a board state where we could have lost on this turn. The opponent can't go land 6 Farewell. They're only on 4 lands. And it's not very much longer. The Ice Explorer does not take very long to mill out the deck. But it being a card that just allows repeated access to Port of Carfell is a very powerful effect in matchups like this. Currently, I have cut the Ice Explorer as something that is like stock of number 3, but it blocks, but is not necessary. Instead, I'm trying to get more value out of my land base, and more acceleration out of my land base. Yeah, so we can speed up the recording and get through this quickly. It's about a 50-50 on whether or not opponents concede when the game's over. And honestly, it doesn't matter to me if the opponent concedes or not. If you're playing a deck like this, have fun with it. If the opponent's going to let you do everything, win however you want. If you want to kill him with Wandering Minstrel, kill him with Wandering Minstrel. And this opponent stays in full control and randomly passes priority in game 2. So I choose to have a bunch of fun with it. So this time we're not going to mismanage our sideboarding time. We're going to very quickly sideboard and immediately hit submit. Not too much time on discussion. So we've got our Heritage Reclamations. We've trimmed down on Scapeshift Spelunkings. Cut an Echoing Deeps for an Otawara. Sorry, not Spelunkings. We trimmed down on a Wandering Minstrel. We trimmed down on Aftermath Analyst. Kind of trimmed around the edges in order to present a consistent deck that can repeatedly answer permanents like Rest in Peace. Heritage Reclamation being a 2-for-1 allows it to trade fairly evenly with Memory Deluge, where they get 2 cards for their card, but we get to prevent them from getting 4 cards for their card, and also draw a card on the way out. Heritage Reclamation plays pretty well in this matchup because of that. But this game, I think, is very instructive. So the opponent choosing to, on their turn 3, play a Omen of the Sea. They do a top-bottom, but then they miss their 4th land drop here. And as I've said repeatedly throughout this video, our game plan is to prevent them from curving out. They've discarded a March of Otherworldly Light. If I just play a Spelunking, if I had played a Spelunking last turn, then they could have played that, taken the Spelunking, and then I don't have my thing, and they didn't have to discard a card. So the opponent had 8 spells in their hand. They had 7 on our turn, and we had 3. We're not going to keep up with them if we don't, if we're just playing spells into their interaction. Because they definitely have 2-mana counter magic, they definitely have Get Lost, Marches, things like that. They're discarding stock-ups. They've discarded 2 stock-ups at this point. Their hand is quite loaded, and we're not going to win if we just play into it. So I'm going to do the only thing that I can do. I'm going to hit every single land drop until I can play so many spells in one turn that my opponent cannot interact with all of them. Continuing to present Ports of Carfell, we have our 2 black mana off of Takenuma in the starting town to be able to start activating Ports of Carfell. And here I count that I have 6 mana, but I don't actually have a blue mana and 2 black mana available to be able to activate the port. Um, so now we can play 3 spells this turn. Now we get to start asking questions. Does the Wandering Minstrel resolve? Does the Spelunking resolve? Does the Tireless Tracker resolve? They've played their 4th land drop. It's a Field of Ruin. Now we don't want them to start being able to profitably spend their turn casting they don't have double blue for Memory Deluge, but they could cast a Wandering Emperor, they could activate their Field of Ruin. There are profitable game actions that they can take. So now we're going to start asking questions, start presenting things, and given what our opponent was discarding, given the hand our opponent kept, given how they are attempting now to curve out and catch up, my primary concern is Farewell. And I want to do everything I can in order to not lose to Farewell. So if our opponent here goes land 6 Farewell, then I've got 2 Ports of Karfell in play. The game's not over for sure. But the game will get very difficult very quickly. So I don't know that I agree with this line. This line is probably a little bit too aggressive. Maybe it's best to activate a bunch of Tireless Tracker clues first. But I do Scapeshift here, and I do try to win on the spot. Opponent's tapped out, they've given us a window, and if we miss, then we get to put an Ice-Still Explorer into play, but Farewell is pretty backbreaking if we don't have any lands in play. But we go all out, sack the Lotus Field 2. There are different lands, like I've been discussing Memorial to Unity in the Discord. Discord links in the description. It's a good place to hang out. Folks are pretty chill. But I've been discussing Memorial to Unity. Other lands have been talked about for improving the Scapeshift piles, and like just to try to give yourself more options as you go. But 100% here, I should be activating more clues, I think, instead of waiting until I get to the end and realize that I have completely missed off of this port. So we're going to put the Ice-Still Explorer back into play. And again, Port of Karfell is the key card. We're not going to have any lands after these Lotus Field triggers resolve. We are going to be able to draw a bunch of cards off of these clues, but 4 cards in hand against 4 cards in hand when their cards are all spells, and Farewell completely cleans everything up, clears the clues, clears the creatures, clears the graveyard. It's going to be a pretty hard thing to come back from if they do have it. So I think that I was probably a little bit too concerned about Farewell here, but given that I had 2 ports and mana for both of them, and no win conditions exposed to the Ports of Karfell, I don't think that this line was correct at all. Thinking back on the fact that it missed when it was 75-ish% to hit, maybe that's skewed thinking. Maybe 75% is enough. But I don't think that we were likely to lose this game to a Farewell in that spot anyways. So here they activate the Field of Ruin. Thanks to Nissa, we're going to get to crack another clue here. And the big question is, can they remove this Ice-Still Explorer? Activating the Field of Ruin means that there's no Farewell coming, but if they can't deal with this Ice-Still Explorer, this Tireless Tracker is going to be able to attack through the Biza and the fish pretty soon. But milling the bear off of the forest entering, and second bear just for good measure here, we're now going to be able to try to combo again without casting a spell. Um, it's playing out the Lotus Field, generates 4 thanks to the Nissa and the untap effect. Playing the Port of Carfel out of our graveyard for mana number 5, and the Forest is mana number 6. We're able to sacrifice the 2 non-port lands and activate the port, and see if our opponent has a way to deal with the Wandering Minstrel. They likely don't, because they haven't attempted to interact with it before in response to a Port of Carfel, but eventually, like, this is what this deck does. It grinds, like, you grind through your own deck to get to what you need to win the game, and then all of a sudden, it all comes together at once. And we're able to get through all of these Tireless Tracker triggers, all of the Istal Explorer triggers, all of these Nissa triggers, and our opponent here is randomly passing priority in full control, and I decide to just have fun with it. It is a fun deck to play. It's fun to be able to do absolutely everything, and here we are going to not only play a Thassa's Oracle, but because unfortunately we drew it, but we're generating mana to be able to activate the Wandering Minstrel enough times to win the game as well. Just in case, just for rubbins. And I seriously considered looping an Otawara to return all of their permanents and win with the Wandering Minstrel instead. But it's just cleaner to do a Thassa's Oracle. And I don't know if there's a dissipate effect in Pioneer. I don't think that there is, but just in case there is, making sure that I don't lose to cards that I don't know whether or not they exist is a nice thing to have. Because once we get through all of this, we no longer have time to do an Ifni Rivulet kill. You can usually kill them 2 different ways before timing out if you're quick about it. But if you're trying to do a Lush Oasis or a Wandering Minstrel, you don't usually have the capability to also do a kill that takes a lot of clicks like an Ifni Rivulet. So we are generating mana just in case we need it, but overall we're not too concerned. Playing this out, turns out the interactive spell was... Oh, they're roping all the way down to 0, making me look bad. Yeah. Turns out the interactive spell was a No More Lies. Very anticlimactic. So we're able to pay for the No More Lies, win the game, and just like that, the matchup's not too bad. It's very rare that you actually manage to combo out in this matchup, but I had 2 opponents in a row let me do it. Anyways, y'all have a great night. Thanks for hanging out.